Time to expose some hard truths in this Bryan Kohberger case.
Like you, be strong to hold the powers of the sun. To dream, believe.
Let's listen to Pavarotti.
Only one.
Hello, welcome to The Revealing. I'm your host, Pavarotti, and I'm here to discuss the Idaho 4 case. And in this episode, it looks like we're going in another direction now. After hearing that they're considering closing at least some, if not all, of the January 23rd hearings, and the defense is fighting to get the information out in the public, well, I think now is the time. You know, this has been a long road in this case. And along this path that we've traveled, I have gone to great lengths to try to bring people with me. I mean, I have backtracked, gone in circles, and did my best to literally bring other people with me as we go through this, because I knew that we would be better as many than as one. Along that way, I've realized that with the exception of a very few out there that are awesome, the rest, they just want to, I really don't believe they have any desire for getting the truth out there. Instead of coming along with me, they decided to fight with me, then demean, and then slander and try to delegitimize. So they want to do that so they can go back to their old stuff. Well, I hate it for them, because I'm no longer going to try to bring anybody else with me, because the battle of public opinion now is not the right battle for me to fight. And that's the battle that I've been fighting. I've been trying to get everybody on the same page so we could address the public opinion thing. Well, that's not going to happen, it doesn't look like. And since they're going to try to hide everything about this case until the trial, and then for all I know, try to hide the trial, well, it's time to expose some things then. It is time to expose some truths in this case. And I'm going to do that in this video. We're going to take speculation and all that kind of stuff and throw that out the window. I'm going to give you some cold, hard facts about this thing. And once you learn these cold, hard facts, you're not going to be able to unlearn them. So let's go. Now, I haven't brought this up in a long time, but the reason that I keep telling people to go back and watch all of my videos is because in the beginning, I hit this hard, and I think it's been forgotten. And now we're going to go back, but we're going to go a little further than I did the first time. You see, the court records in this case actually tell you all you need to know for you to investigate facts in this case. In the very first request for discovery by the defense team in this case, the second thing they asked for was statements of co-defendant. Any written or recorded statements by a co-defendant and the substance of any relevant oral statement made by a co-defendant, whether before or after arrest, in response to interrogation by any person known by the co-defendant to be a peace officer or agent of the prosecuting attorney, or which are otherwise relevant to the offense charged. That's what the defense asked the prosecution for. But it's not what they asked for that's important. It was the prosecution's response. But then the defense asked for state witnesses. Provide a written list of the names, addresses, phone numbers, and or other reasonable means of contact for all persons having knowledge of relevant facts who may be called by the prosecuting attorney as witnesses at trial, together with an NCIC report and a Spillman report of any such persons. Provide the statements made by the prosecution witnesses or prospective witnesses made to the prosecuting attorney or their agents or to any official involved in the investigatory process of the case. This includes statements to employees of the prosecutor's office, such as witness coordinators and all members of any law enforcement agency that has had any involvement in the matter. And again, it's these words, together with an NCIC report and a Spillman report of any such persons. This is what the defense wanted about the state's witnesses. But again, it's not what the defense asked for. It was the prosecution's response. Here's the prosecution's response to the written or recorded statements of a co-defendant and the substance of any relevant oral statement made by a co-defendant, whether before or after arrest, in response to interrogation by any person known by the co-defendant to be a peace officer or agent of the prosecuting attorney, have been or will be disclosed or otherwise made available. And then you'll notice the footnote at the end says, see Exhibit A. You see, folks, if there wasn't a co-defendant or written statements of a co-defendant, then it would not have said see Exhibit A. If this was boilerplate language like some people would like to think, it certainly would not cite an exhibit for the information that the defense is seeking to learn. And in response to the witnesses, the state writes, a written list of the names and addresses of all persons having knowledge of relevant facts who may be called by the state as witnesses at the trial has been or will be provided separately in accordance with ICR 16b6. Any record of prior felony convictions of any such persons, which is within the knowledge of the prosecuting attorney, and all statements made by the prosecution witnesses or prospective prosecution witnesses to the prosecuting attorney or the prosecuting attorney's agents, or to any official involved in the investigatory process of the case, have been or will be disclosed or otherwise made available. And again, you'll see Exhibit A. Consistent with Ramirez versus State, Idaho 119-1037, and Idaho Public Safety and Security Information System, ILETS, restrictions on dissemination of criminal history information, the state generally does not seek NCIC reports or Spillman reports of witnesses. Additionally, the state may call as witnesses anyone otherwise identified or referred to in report statements or other documents referred to in this response. So once again, they list C Exhibit A, so there's definitely witnesses, and they cite a case. If this was boilerplate language, they would not do that. The case they cite is Ramirez versus State, and it relates to the information the defense wanted on NCIC and Spillman reports. You see, NCIC and Spillman reports, that lists their criminal history. The defense wanted the criminal history of the confidential informants in the case. The state says, we generally do not do Spillman reports or NCIC reports. And then they cite a case to be able to exclude them from having to do that. You see, when I say they're trying to get the confidential informant uncovered so that they can bring into question his informant's reliability, it all goes back to these first documents in the case. But for you to truly understand, you have to look at the case that the prosecution cites in their response, Ramirez versus State. So in Ramirez versus State, this was a case in Idaho that went to the appellate court and was overruled. That's why the state cites this case, because the ruling was in favor of the state. But when you look at the details of the case and why they cited it, then it tells you what you need to know about the Kohberger case. And you can see Alberto Ramirez appeals from a district court order denying his petition for post-conviction relief. Ramirez was found guilty by a jury of 2 counts of delivery of a controlled substance. Ramirez contends that the trial court erred by failing to make specific findings of fact and conclusions of law on 2 issues raised in his petition. Those issues, which are also raised in this appeal, are whether the state erred by failing to disclose exculpatory evidence to Ramirez, and whether his attorney failed to properly represent him. For reasons explained below, we uphold the district court's order denying Ramirez's petition for post-conviction relief. What was the exculpatory evidence that they were hoping to get thrown out on Ramirez? Real simple. Ramirez was arrested by the Nampa Police Department for selling cocaine. At trial, Ramirez insisted he was not the man who had delivered the cocaine to the 2 confidential informants. However, both confidential informants testified otherwise. The jury found Ramirez guilty of delivering a controlled substance. He did not appeal. However, he later filed a petition for post-conviction relief. Ramirez contends that after the trial, he discovered that the prosecuting attorney had withheld exculpatory evidence from him. You see that again, withheld exculpatory evidence. We hear that a lot in the Kohberger case. What was the exculpatory evidence that they held from him? The petition was filed when Ramirez discovered that misdemeanor charges had been dismissed against both confidential informants during the same time period that they were working for the Nampa Police Department on his case. One informant had been charged in a shoplifting incident that occurred at the Shopko store in Nampa. Both informants were charged with petty theft as a result of an incident which took place at the Starlight Motel in Nampa. The informants were accused of stealing a set of car keys and $20 in cash from a man they had met at the motel. Ramirez construed these facts as exculpatory evidence, which was withheld by the prosecutor and therefore not available to his defense. Ramirez claims that the prosecutor was under an affirmative duty to disclose that the confidential informants had been charged with misdemeanor offenses during the period they were employed by the police. Because the credibility of the witnesses was the only issue at trial, Ramirez argues that the misdemeanor record of each confidential informant was needed to impeach the state's witnesses. In addition, Ramirez alleges that the misdemeanor charges of both of the confidential informants were dismissed by the state in exchange for their cooperation and testimony at trial. After hearing testimony on these allegations, the district judge entered formal findings of fact and conclusions of law. The district judge stated in his findings on the post-conviction petition that these 2 confidential informants had been charged with misdemeanor offenses, but that the charges were later dismissed by the state. The district judge noted that the dismissal of the charges by the state was not the result of any action by the police officers involved in the arrest of Ramirez, and that the dismissals were unrelated to the prosecution of Ramirez. The district judge also found that there was adequate and substantial evidence to convict Ramirez on the charges brought against him, and that, in his opinion, the verdict would not have been different had the jury been informed that these misdemeanor charges had been filed against the two witnesses and dismissed. Ramirez asserts that the district court's order should be reversed because detailed findings of fact and conclusions of law were absent on the two issues raised in his petition for post-conviction relief. Because a post-conviction proceeding is civil in nature, IRCP applies and requires that written findings of fact, conclusions of law be made on all the material issues raised. However, a reversal is unnecessary if the record gives the appellate court a complete understanding of the material issues raised in appeal. So the state cites this case. This case is all about the confidential informants and the belief that the confidential informants had their charges thrown out because of their testimony in the case. And because the state did not disclose the fact that they had these charges, because they eliminated them for their testimony, then they could not go towards the informant's reliability in the case. This is why Bill Thompson cites he doesn't do the NCIC and Spillman reports on these witnesses so that he can hide the fact that they have charges, and their charges are serious charges, and it would go towards their informant's reliability, which is what the defense has been trying to uncover the whole time in this case. You see, folks, it's very interesting to me how easily people get things just mixed up and confused in this case. I'll give you an example. I look at some young lady that posts the documents now. They do it like on a daily basis, and they seem like they're possibly an attorney or at least a paralegal, and they post documents and they explain the documents in a very slow and detailed manner. But even when I watch them, I go, man, it's amazing how they get things just so wrong. For example, I watched them put something up last night about the motion for us to be able to see the IGG portion, at least, of the hearing. And in their assessment, they were saying that the IGG was part of these suppression motions by the defense. The defense is not trying to suppress the IGG. So that's why I go, wait a minute, are they really just confusing it, or is this more misinformation that's put out there to try to confuse people? Never once has the defense filed a suppression motion to suppress the IGG in this case. Go back and look at the suppression motions. The defense filed a motion to suppress the genetic information. That's not the IGG. The genetic information is the DNA. Very different than the IGG. You see, the defense files a motion to open the hearings on the IGG, and this isn't the first time that they've done that, if you remember. They want all of the IGG information open to the public because they know that the IGG was not real. It was done in reverse. Once they can get that out there, then they can focus in on the real nexus. The real nexus is the confidential informant, just like they've said from the beginning. Then it becomes informant's reliability is the real issue in the case. Like Ann Taylor said in so many filings, the informant's reliability. That's why she wanted the NCIC and the Spillman reports. because it shows their prior history on the court record, their prior history of all their charges, including perjury. You see, when I dove in to try to figure out who the confidential informant was, there's only a couple of people that it could be, because based on everything I just read to you, the confidential informant is people that have had charges dropped because of this case. If you read that case law that I just read to you, they had their informants, they dropped their charges to be able to testify. The same thing has happened in this case. That's why they cited that case law. So that means the informants can only be Emma or Demetrius, because they got charges dropped. However, when I dove into that the first time, it just didn't seem to pan out for me. So, and the reason it didn't is because those charges that were dropped weren't in an Idaho court. They were way over in a Washington court. And this isn't an FBI case. I can assure you, this is a state of Idaho case. This is a Moscow, Idaho case. So I don't believe that they would have the power to go and get charges dropped on Emma and B way over in Washington. That's why I looked further for the potential confidential informant. And that's why way back in February, I found Farley. And the reason I found Farley was because of what I've just read to you right now. I was looking for a major arrest that happened around that time. And then I dove in and looked for charges being dropped, significant charges being dropped or significantly reduced around the time that they found Bryan Kohberger. I know that there's a co-defendant in the case based on what I just read to you. Now, it's not too hard to figure out who the co-defendant is in the case, because the co-defendant in a quadruple homicide case is not somebody that they're going to release and wait for the trial. So you have to really stop and think, is anybody else around there that's been in anywhere close to this case? Have they been incarcerated for 2 years and we just didn't know it? No, we've been through every person sitting in that jail. I mean, they would still be in that Latah County jail, folks. And I've watched the jail roster religiously for almost 2 years. Nobody's been sitting in that thing. So that means the only possible co-defendant in this case, and by the way, if that was the case, you know, they would have announced it. They wouldn't be hiding it. So you got to ask yourself two things. Why would they hide the co-defendant? And why is he not sitting in jail? Well, there's only one answer, because that co-defendant's no longer alive. So you put two and two together. You've got a confidential informant who turned in Bryan Kohberger and a co-defendant. That's where my investigation dove into this thing. That's how I came to the final conclusion that the co-defendant wasn't even the proper suspect. The co-defendant was set up, and Bryan Kohberger just happens to be associated with the co-defendant. Now, how is Bryan Kohberger associated with Brent Kopacka? I really don't know. I have a guess, though. Let me show you my best guess of how Bryan Kohberger got to know Brent Kopacka.
Where do you live at?
Out in Pullman.
In Pullman?
Yeah, 1455 Northeast Grandview.
What apartments are those?
The Pimlico.
Pimlico? What unit number, if you remember?
I don't remember.
Pimlico, though?
Yeah.
How long have you lived there?
Like 6 months now.
Okay.
Yeah, I've got 2 babies.
Now, that body cam footage was on June 29th, 2022. You could hear Brent clearly state he lived in the Pimlico apartments, and he'd been living there for about 6 months. Now, we don't know how much longer he lived in the Pimlico apartments after June 29th, but we do know at some point he must have moved to the Coffee House apartments. So how long did he live in the Pimlico apartments? Well, we don't know, but he definitely overlapped when Bryan moved to Pullman. And Bryan moved into his apartments there at Steptoe in June of 2022. So they definitely lived in those two apartment complexes at the same time. That's verified now. How long they lived next to each other, I don't know, but the proximity of their residences gives me my best nexus to how they met each other. As you can see on the map here, Pimlico Apartments is just across the street from Kohberger's Steptoe Apartments. So living within feet of each other for any amount of time would certainly give them the opportunity to meet. And it's been said that Brent did a lot of walking, and we know Bryan is a walking runner, so I think it would be fairly easy for them to have met each other as they're both out walking. And then you've got to understand that in all of the defense filings, anything that they don't want you to know, they can put under seal. The only time they put things in open records is so that you can know the information. In these recent motions to suppress, the only reason to openly put in the information that law enforcement was looking for a nexus between Kohberger's Apple ID and Wi-Fi Army owns was the defense's way of trying to let you in on some information. Who else would have Wi-Fi Army owns in Bryan Kohberger's life that pertains to this case and has merit in this case? Now, you may be thinking, well, then Pavarotti, how do we know that it wasn't Kohberger and Kopacka that committed the atrocity? Well, I can give you 100 reasons, but like I said in the beginning of this video, I'm only going to focus on things that I can prove in the court docs in this video. So let's talk about something that I can now prove with court docs, and then you tell me, did they do it? We can now prove through the court record that there was two Hyundai Elantras, both white, both matching almost the exact same description, within a block of each other in the area near the times of the unalivings. One of them was a 2015, more than likely, at the very least a 14 to 16 white Hyundai Elantra, and the other one was a 2013, more than likely, but at the very least an 11 to 13 white Hyundai Elantra. So that is not a coincidence. That is a plan, and that is a plan to set some folks up, in my humble opinion. But I can't prove that is a plan to set some folks up, but you would have to really be dense to not understand that is a plan to set some folks up. But I can prove that there was a 2014 to 16 in the area and a 2011 to 13 in the area. And when I say in the area, I mean within hundreds of feet of each other. Because now in the court record, in the motion for Frank's hearing, or in the judge's order on the motion for Frank's hearing, he literally put in his footnotes that defendant cites generally to Exhibit D9 for the proposition that law enforcement's vehicle expert felt more comfortable setting the date range of 2011 to 2013 for the Elantra. That is the one witnessed on the video in the King Road neighborhood making all the passes. Now, that expert, as you see in his curricula vitae, has 35 years of experience identifying vehicles, and he has equipment and programs that assist in him identifying those vehicles. So if he says it's an 11 to 13, you can bet that was an 11 to 13 in the King Road neighborhood. So that's verified by court docs now. but it's also been verified in court docs that there was a 14-16 made by the identification made by that same FBI agent with all those same qualifications just around the corner. And I showed you this in a previous court doc. You can see a report from an analyst for the FBI, same analyst, dated March 21st, 2023, shows the analyst heavily relying on a video of a car heading in the wrong direction and at the wrong time on Ridge Road. So that one, he obviously has identified as a 14-16, but that one's going the wrong direction at the wrong time on Ridge Road. And that is verifiable proof that there was two white Hyundai Elantras in the neighborhood, just a couple of year models apart, at the same time. That is not a coincidence. That is a pre-planned setup, folks. So, I've heard it said many times that Pavarotti has went all in on what he's saying, and when this thing goes to trial and he's proven wrong, well, then his YouTube career is over. As if that was even a fear. Give me a break. You know how much time and effort when you get obsessed with a case like this you put into it? I mean, I'm really not looking forward to doing this again anytime soon. So if my YouTube career is over at the end of this case, well, then that may be a good thing for me. However, I wouldn't be worried about that either, though. Because when this thing does go to trial, if it goes to trial, and it's an open trial, I can assure you I'm not going to be the one with egg on my face like so many others out there that push the nonsense, and all of those mainstream media outlets that push the nonsense. Now they'll pivot like, oh wow, nobody could have known this. This is shocking. It's not shocking. It's been there since the very beginning. All you have to do is dive in and look. And I know people hate it when they think I get full of myself, and I'm not full of myself, but I do know where my skills lie. And my skills lie in the ability to do extensive research on a subject, educate myself. My skills also lie in reading comprehension. And then you back it up with life experience and street smarts. I know how the criminal world operates. It's not too hard for me to figure this stuff out. I don't know why it's so hard for these others. But again, I've tried to bring them along. There's no more bringing along. The public opinion thing is gone. I can see that we're not going to make that impact. So the best I can do now is just try to get as much of the truth out as possible, because it looks like the court's going to try to keep it in as long as possible, if not forever. Well, I can't do that. So here we go. We're going to start really unloading some truths here in all these videos going forward. But in the meantime, please like and subscribe to the channel. Post your comments, thoughts, your criticisms. And until next time, Pavarotti's out.
I was an ordinary boy until I broke the rules. My